Afternoon, everyone. How are you all?
You all right?
Very nice to be here. Nice to have been invited.
Yeah.
So, you're here to talk about packaging. We as human beings have developed as sort of very distinctly visual creatures, and sometimes maybe even to our own detriment. And hence the commonality of phrases like, everything is not what it seems, looks can be deceiving, don't judge a book by its cover, etc. So we, as individuals, and also as companies, are acutely aware of the importance, the power and influence exercised by the way in which something is portrayed to us, by the visuals. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about visual experience and surrounding our beer and surrounding beer culture in general. Despite the rationality that we all have and the discernment that the majority of us possess as consumers, it doesn't make any of us immune to the sort of pull of big brand advertising and that kind of sort of osmotic soak that you get, that absorption by the omnipresence of brands that we see all around us all the time. So we know that aesthetics are very important to us, and there's no limit to the different kinds of messages you can portray with your aesthetics. So today we're discussing packaging, and sort of broadly in line with that, I'd like to encourage you to think about it from maybe a slightly different angle. So, as you probably know, at Partizan Brewing, we make beer, bottom line. And like many of the bigger companies producing beer and other kinds of alcoholic beverages, we think we're selling more than just what's in the bottle. The experience that's surrounding any kind of consumable product is much more than it exists at a fundamental level. So in this way, ultimately, whether it be, big international industrial scale brands owned by big corporations producing in huge warehouse facilities, or whether it be small independent producers like ourselves selling somewhere locally, we're aspiring to the same thing. So where does the difference lie? We believe it's with engagement of the consumer. The brewing industry historically, probably most of you will know, ever since it reached the sort of grand scale that it exists at now, has always been brand-driven, brand-led industry. You only need to look at the growth in the 19th and 20th centuries of the big family-owned regional breweries and the kind of series of acquisitions and mergers that occurred to create the national and international brands that we have today. So marketing and all kinds of packaging of products are placed at the forefront to make them ever present in consumers' minds, removing, in some ways, the burden of choice, whilst also giving you the illusion that you've always opted for the best product. As such, at one time, most breweries in the country would have had their own series of pubs, all of which sold only their own produce. And then brand partnership deals became something that were really, really, really important, sort of ensuring the flooding of spaces with imagery, branding, taglines, all associated to the products that were on sale. And so by curating an experience, a really enjoyable experience, whatever that may be, on every level from a drink with mates down the local to a grand arena event or a concert of some sort, but by ensuring the prominence and ready availability of the product that you want to sell, what you're doing is building a positive association, obviously, and that ultimately engendering some kind of brand loyalty. And that's something that happens to us all throughout our lives in some way or another, in a kind of insidious way that we perhaps don't necessarily realize at the time. So for us at Partizan, the decision to sort of employ and implement an anti-branding strategy in our beer packaging has been a very, very particular and conscious one. We believe firmly that things like brand partnership and that oversaturation of media advertising robs people of a certain degree, a certain portion of the experience that you have, your potential experience in drinking a bottle of beer. By the time the bottle's in your hand or in the glass, we think that, a large part of that experience has already passed, or indeed the illusions surrounding it have faded that you've been sold by the advertising. I think much about the sensory delights of experiencing anything and consuming a product can end up being coiled up and lost to things like perception and preconceived notions of what to expect from a humble bottle of beer. So in terms of flavor, or maybe just in terms of entire satisfaction of the experience. And we're also left with, whether they be our own personal or whether they be borrowed, all kind of nostalgic reminiscences to associate and to measure against that particular one experience that you're having. So obviously, you and I are all sophisticated consumers and very cognizant of these things. But that doesn't mean that, to a certain degree, all of us are not affected by it. But alongside this, there is now a much greater development of honesty in product marketing. And I think that's really increasingly appreciated amongst more curious and discerning consumers who are seeking something beyond just an average experience, and whether that be drinking a beer or whatever else they may be doing. So anyone who's even loosely familiar with Partizan will know that one of the very important things about our beers is that they are constantly changing. They're not stagnant. And that's very neatly reflected in the beautiful artwork that adorns our bottles. And Alex here today, and we'll have plenty of a chance to hear from him about sort of the genesis of his ideas and what it's like to sort of interpret and implement that no brand policy whilst trying to still reflect the entire output of a company. Suffice to say that essentially what it means is that we don't really, by anyone's standards, have what you would call a saleable brand. And to some people, they might consider that a detrimental thing. I'd like to encourage you to think about it in a slightly different way. So in making beer in our brewing, we really enjoy the idea of experimentation, experimenting with ingredients, pushing the boundaries of style, playing with and subverting styles of beer, and not submitting to the constraints of the market, what they tell us is the zeitgeist of the moment, and also not being bound by any of our own previous creations. So we can do things like introduce new hops when we feel like it, new grains. We can ferment with whatever yeast strain we like. We can ferment with 2 or 3 yeast strains at one time. We can ferment in an oak barrel. We can do whatever we want to do and produce beer that makes us excited. And we're not sort of tied to this sort of specter of a core range of beers and have a whole host of regular customers who are paying for that core range that's really strictly governed and gives them exactly what they expect all of the time. But what this does is it trades on a consumer trust in the producer and its people rather than in the product. So, you know, the product is both allowed and expected to remain fluid within that. So the loyalty that would elsewhere perhaps maybe be tied to a brand, we are hoping here is shifted towards individuals, and the trust is invested in the unerring quality of the product, in the professional prowess of the people who produce it, and in the trust that their ideas and that their ingenuity will create something that will deliver a great experience for you. So although you might never again have the same Partizan Pale Ale that first wowed you, we hope that you can be assured you'll find another equally rewarding experience within the same range of beers that we produce in the future. So what I'm really saying is that we feel this sort of engagement with our customers is at the heart of what we do. We continue to remain engaged with our craft, you know, shifting focus and changing as we grow and develop as people, as professionals, as we learn more about what we do, and as we push those boundaries and find out what's possible and what's not. Within that, obviously, we always try to implement rigorous standards and constantly seeking to really attain the high expectations that customers expect from us. And I think that's one of the most important things. But that's a real mutual engagement between us. It's two parts of a symbiotic relationship that we think is a nice, delicate balance and one that's very important to maintain. And so we would hope that as you pop open a bottle of Partizan, or if you go to the bar and you have it on draft, whether it's for the first time as a brand new customer, or whether you are a valued customer or a fan, shall we say, that you will be delivered the same novel, interesting, and unique experience. So imagine that you pick up a bottle for the first time. We're hoping that your eyes will be drawn to the label, the beautiful and the clever and unique and interesting designs. We hope that will encourage you to look about what we say on the bottle about the beer. The words are very limited, but there's something there for you to play with. We're trying to spark ideas and for people to be allowed to interpret this in their own way themselves. And hopefully at that stage, your senses are slightly piqued. Not knowing what to expect before you pop open the bottle, you're engaged more, and you use your faculties to take stock of what you find in the glass. So, the aroma, the flavor, the color, all of those are appreciated in the moment for the first time as a new experience, and something which is much more rewarding than simply remembering the last time you had a beer and it falling very much into that ritualistic thing that all of us do when we repeat experiences again and again and again. We're trying to deliver something novel and exciting for people each time they have a beer, so that you're not taking those moments for granted, you're not glossing over the experience, and that what you have is not tainted by any preconceptions about what you believe it to be, or anything that's peddled in the media about what you put in your glass and what that says about you as a person. So, without being too romantic about it, we believe that it's all about the beer. Thank you.